Good evening, this is Brown at I've Brown. Hope everyone made it through a week okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about Arion, Lord of Atlantis, issues 30 through 33. So here we got 30. Lady Chian and Arion, definitely a badass battle couple in this picture. I love it. 31. Things definitely getting hot and heated on the cover here. And of course, you know, surrounded by all sorts of weird beasties. And no, that is not Arion that Lady Chian is kissing. So definitely some drama. 32. You know, I love this look here. You know, you got, you know, sort of the fantastical, you know, with Arion, you know, with his magic and everything. And it looks like he's going into hell, you know, with all the, you know, lake of fire. And then you got these, you know, monsters on either side of him. Some really good artwork by Duursema on the cover. And last but not least, 33. Very psychedelic. I love it. So this storyline is called The Magic Odyssey, and it's a storyline in which a lot happens within the span of 4 issues. And it also serves as the penultimate storyline within the Arion series. And amongst other things, series co-creator and original artist Jan Duursema returned to not only do, you know, the cover art, which she'd been doing, you know, even when she wasn't doing the interior art, but she also has returned to do the interior art. And so with respect to Kara Sherman Terreno, who is a good artist in her own right, Duursema for me is always going to be the signature Arion artist. I mean, you know, she was just so good at combining, you know, the believability of, you know, the human anatomy, along with, you know, say, fantastical surroundings, whether it be, you know, magic being used or just alien environments. But she was always good at making things look believable, or even say when, you know, Atlantean technology was coming into play, like say hovercraft or something like that. But just, she's a very, very good artist, and I just, I loved her work on this series, and still do, obviously. Excuse me. Anyway, though, the story kicks off where the city has been, you know, through quite a bit, you know, sieges, a prison break, and now strange weather phenomena, which, you know, no one can really account for, you know, but they're able to use, you know, the machinery to find out where this, you know, phenomena seems to be coming from, and which is this part of Atlantis that was seemingly destroyed a long time ago. And so Arion and Lady Chian and a couple other people, they, you know, find this facility, which was supposedly destroyed, but it turns out it's still functioning, even though it's, you know, quite decrepit and has been seemingly abandoned for some time. But they go into this place, and they find out that, you know, there's this sort of mad scientist guy who's running the joint, and he's quite old. But no, he, you know, he realizes that he has visitors. You know, he sticks, you know, his army of, you know, human-animal hybrids on them. And it turns out that one of these hybrids is, in fact, Wyynde, who, last we saw of him, was catatonic, but had seemingly wandered off from, you know, the wreckage of the building he was in. And so everyone thought he was dead, but, you know, I mean, he's still alive. But apparently, you know, in his catatonic days, you know, he had wandered away from the city of Atlantis, and in the process had gotten kidnapped by minions of this mad scientist, and, you know, became, you know, one of his experiments. And so when Lady Chian and Arion find out, that this is in fact Wyynde, this sort of saber-toothed, tiger human hybrid, they're able to, work with him to sort of, get through to him, and he's able to help them out against, the not only, the machinery, like these robots that the mad scientist has, but against, the laser traps as well. And so Arion is able to use his magic, which has been a good portion of which has been restored to him. So he's no longer confined to just doing, conjurer's tricks, but he's able to use his magic to find the pulse of the place, where the power is coming from. And in the process, the mad scientist ends up getting electrocuted. And so at this point, they get Wyynde and Wyynde out of there, and the other demi-humans are either dead or have, fled the place. But unfortunately, though, Arion, even though he's significantly more powerful than he has been as of late, he still is unable to, find a way to change Wyynde back into his, normal human form. And so he goes to the crystals that hold the essence of his father, the Shaka, Kalkuha, and I was thinking of someone else, but anyway, but unfortunately, though, the crystals have actually been destroyed, and so, Arion, in one has, found out that, obviously he's been under a magic attack, but he doesn't know, by who, but also, he needs to find some way to, restore, himself to full power, because, at this point, I mean, he was already, trying to rebuild himself as a defender of Atlantis, but also, for the sake of his friend Wyynde, he needs to be able to, be, the mage he once was, in order to have the power to restore Wyynde to his normal self. And so Lady Chian recommends that they go to her former homeland, Hoshan. And so, Arion and Lady Chian and Wyynde, they go to this, sort of, it's almost like a Shangri-La in a way, from Lost Horizon or something like that. Except, I mean, it's more like, I mean, visually, I mean. But anyway, though, so you get a bit more on Lady Chian's background. And it turns out that her old boyfriend, Tomokata, is, living there. And it turns out that he has his own evil schemes, because it turns out he's the one who, through sorcery, destroyed the crystal shards. So Arion wouldn't be able to, summon the shade of his father, Kalkuha. And so, in the meantime, though, he also is wanting to win back Lady Chian. And so it's sort of a twofold trap, because he's wanting to, seduce her and get her back, but he's also wanting to defeat and destroy Arion. But it turns out he's actually working for someone, an old enemy of Arion's, as well as Arion's family in general. Dark Magistra, Arion's evil mother, who last he saw of her was, a long time ago. And so it turns out that this whole thing was like one elaborate revenge scheme. And so while Arion, he is able to retrain himself, because some of the people within this, place, this magical land, are able to help Arion, focus and, better himself. He also has to get to the bottom of this. And so in the process, once he you know, dives into it, so to speak. He finds out, you know, some stuff about himself. Like he starts to remember things about, you know, when for the amount of time that he was, you know, regrowing, if you will, because he was killed a long time ago, but, you know, due to, you know, various magical shenanigans, you know, he was, you know, sort of placed in this sort of, you know, alternate, you know, dimension. And so it turns out that this dimension was in fact the heart of Dark World. And it's really complicated. But anyway, though, he reconnects with some, you know, old friends of his, you know, Gerald, who hadn't been seen since, you know, the beginning of the series, but, you know, she was sort of like Arion's surrogate mother while he was, you know, basically being reborn over a period of time, you know, from a boy into a man. And then there was also, you know, this imp, this sort of cat-like imp named Guy, and it's spelled Ghy. But, you know, apparently he and Arion were, you know, good friends, you know, when Arion was within this sort of pocket dimension, if you will. But in the meantime, though, while Arion's relearning all this, Dark Magistra is, you know, has basically stripped him of his powers and is, you know, attempting to, you know, do her thing, which is basically to, you know, strike back at Atlantis and, you know, anyone associated with Arion, you know, because of the fact that, you know, he's the one who killed her son and his brother Garn, amongst other things, but also because she really hates his father. And so, yeah, so Arion eventually is able to, you know, get, with the help of Gerald, his surrogate mother, he's able to, you know, get his magic back. And also, you know, he was able to utilize some of the mystic training from Lady Chian's people, you know, which is a lot of, you know, psychological going into yourself to find yourself type bit. And so he's able to fully regain his magic, finally, and he's able to defeat Dark Magistra. And once he makes it out of this, you know, pocket dimension, you know, Tomokata, the guy who's, you know, been sort of, you know, manipulating, you know, Lady Chian, as well as Arion to a lesser extent, it turns out that, you know, he's been mortally wounded by sort of the, you know, magical, you know, feedback, and he begs Lady Chian to kill him, and because he doesn't want his soul to be taken by the, you know, dark forces that are associated with Dark Magistra. And so, you know, with some reluctance, you know, because she still had feelings for him, she ends up beheading him. So that way, you know, when he dies, his soul isn't going to go over to, you know, this demonic realm. But anyway, though, the story ends with Arion basically being able to finally restore Wyynde to his normal self, but also, you know, the state of the ruling body of Atlantis is in a state of uncertainty because the king of Atlantis, Datula, sadly, he's killed himself out of a severe depression, and, you know, they're trying to find out, you know, who's going to be, you know, taking his place, and amongst other people that have kind of, you know, thrown their hats into the ring, his estranged daughter, let's see, what was her name? Tagala. Sorry, I wrote some of the stuff down here, but Tagala is King Datula's estranged daughter, and this is the first time, you know, the readers have seen her, you know, including me. And so, you know, it turns out that, you know, even though she and her dad maybe didn't part on good terms, she's arguably the best candidate to take Datula's place. And so, you know, even though Arion has his powers back now, he also, and Wyynde is back to his normal self again, and things seem to be on the mend as far as the three of them goes. Well, there's still quite a bit of a rough road ahead in terms of who's going to lead Atlantis. Anyway, yeah, I enjoyed the Magic Odyssey. I thought it was, they did a good job of, accomplishing several things, within a short span of, issues. And I liked how, Paul Kupperberg and Duursema were able to tap into, a bunch of lore that, we'd already seen before in some ways, or at the very least, having some callbacks to it, like, forgotten technology of Atlantis, turning up, i.e., the mad scientist and his toys. Also, I like the fact that we got to see, a part of Atlantis that we never seen before, namely Hoshan, Lady Chian's homeland, or former homeland, I guess you could say, and it just added to, I guess, this feeling of world building, which I've always enjoyed within the series. But also, I liked, how the character development was kind of a focus as well. I mean, not just with Arion, because, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of focus with him. And I did like how he was having, you saw him, training himself, or at least being trained by, the masters within, Hoshan, and, how he was having to, sort of start from scratch, especially after having, discovered that he can't, rely on the shade of his father anymore. And so, when he finally gets his magic back, I mean, it's after kind of this process of, physical and spiritual rediscovery, because, once he's within, the heart of the dark world, he's coming into contact with, some old friends of his, namely, Guy and, Gerald. I mean, he learns more about, who he used to be, and also, more, which kind of leads into who he needs to be now. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And of course, with the horror of, the, Dark Magistra's, scheme, and, how she's basically pulling the strings of it all. It's like she's someone that you thought was, over and done with a long time ago, but, she hasn't lost any of her edge when she's, returned to the picture. And, and it's kind of a sad bit because, you realize that this is Arion's real mother, but, she hates him. And so it's like there's never going to be, a heartwarming, mending of fences between the two. But I did like how, Arion's surrogate mother, Gerald, was brought back into the picture because, when she was first introduced, I mean, it was kind of, there was just a lot going on, and it was, difficult to really get a read on her. This is like way back in the beginning of the series, but I did like the character of Guy, the cat-like imp creature, because he kind of looked like, maybe like a cat version of X-Men's Nightcrawler. But, I liked his character because, I mean, he was, jovial and funny, but at the same time, you could definitely tell that, he was actually a friend of Arion's, even if Arion couldn't remember him. But also, let's see, this was kind of it was a bit of a sad point, but I did like seeing how the ruling body of Atlantis, was affected, by Datula's decision to commit suicide, which in itself was pretty depressing because, I mean, in a way you can kind of understand why he does it, just because, he's depressed at having been, losing his capabilities as a leader, but also how, he's easily manipulated by outside evil forces, which has happened, like, quite often within the span of a few issues. But, coming from his perspective, I mean, you know, it was sad, but at least you could understand why he did it, I guess. But at the same time, you know, it's definitely not, you know, a happy moment. It's a very sad moment when they find his body. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing more of Tagala, you know, because she seemed like an interesting character, kind of like, you know, a warrior woman herself, you know, a kind of a giant warrior woman, but who nonetheless had, you know, a lot of tactical, you know, capabilities and skill when it came to leading people. And so, you know, it makes sense that she's kind of, you know, the ideal candidate for, you know, leading Atlantis in terms of, you know, the line of, I forgot what it's called, but basically, when, you know, the children of the ruler are picked to, you know, rule when, you know, said ruler is dead or something like that. But yeah, so I mean, it was definitely an interesting look into the political side of things, because there's also a lot of backstabbing and intrigue. And so, you know, even though Arion's in a better position himself than he was, you know, several issues ago, you know, because he's at full power now, there's going to be a different danger altogether just from political drama, you know, alone. So I was definitely intrigued. I'm definitely intrigued to see where that goes. Also, yeah, the character of Tomakata, Lady Chian's ex-boyfriend, you know, we'd seen him in in the flashbacks of Lady Chian's solo story, but this is the first time we actually see him, you know, developed in full as a character. And, you know, he's a pretty good villain. I mean, on one hand, I mean, yeah, you can understand, I mean, he's ultimately, you know, doing what he does because, you know, he's wanting to recapture, you know, the love that he, you know, once had with Lady Chian. And while she does, you know, feel, you know, some of that for him, you know, she, you know, is in love with Arion. But unfortunately, Tomokato is able to, you know, use, you know, some, you know, dark magic to sort of, you know, manipulate things to where she starts to fall in love with him. And so it's like this, you know, tug of war, and Arion, you know, is initially clueless as to what's going on, but, you know, there's definitely a rift that's caused between him and Lady Chian, and so Tomokata is, you know, a very devious fellow, and but ultimately, though, he's a pawn of Dark Magistra, who's really running the show here. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely cool to see Arion, you know, finally get his magic back, and it's something that, you know, I was looking at the letter columns, and a lot of readers have been clamoring for some time now, you know, because, I mean, he used to be like a top-level mage, and now it's like, you know, he's relying on swordplay and parlor tricks. And so, you know, once he's gotten his magic back within the last issue, it's like, you know, finally, you know, but I honestly think, though, that they should have, you know, had something like this happen earlier in the series, like, say, within its second year, you know, because, you know, the second year is when you know, in the opinion of myself and quite a few other readers, according to the letter columns, you know, the second year was where they relied way too much on the character of Garn to be sort of a driving, you know, force and arch nemesis for Arion. And so it's like, you know, Garn would be defeated, but instead of waiting, you know, I don't know, 10 issues later, you know, he's back within 1 or 2 issues. And so it just got to a point where it's like, you know, oh, it's Garn again already, you know, and it just, you know, it's like, well, I thought Arion was supposed to be trying to find a way to, you know, gain more power, you know, this whole time, but instead it's just, you know, dealing with Garn, and not even making any effort to, you know, get power, you know, and it wasn't until a couple of issues before the Magic Odyssey that Arion even, you know, was shown making, you know, an attempt to look for more magic, really, as in like making like an issue-long effort to do so. But here, though, it's like, I mean, I'm glad he finally got his magic back, and it was a good storyline, and it was a, you know, it was pretty cool seeing, you know, more of Lady Chian's background, and, you know, I liked seeing, you know, this hidden, past, that's gradually being brought to light, from of Arion. But I just wish that the storyline had been done in the second year as opposed to this, final third year, which, I'm not going to say it's too little too late because I haven't read the last, couple of issues yet. I'm about to, but at the same time, the writing's on the wall. I mean, the series is coming to an end, and even though there was just so much more potential, it's like, I'm glad that it happened, but it would have been nice, for me at least, I mean, in my opinion, if they had done this in the second year, so that way, at the very least, they wouldn't have had to say, oh, well, I shouldn't say had to, but, maybe they wouldn't have thought to rely on Garn as overly much as they initially did, in the second year. Because, I mean, within the realm of magic, anything's possible. And as these 4 issues, attest, I mean, there are so many other, entities and creatures, just within the realm of magic alone, that they could have done so many more stories, and not have to focus on, the character of Garn. But as it is, though, within these 4 issues, Arion finally got the magic back, and we got, a little bit more world building, both in terms of the physical world and the magical world. And so, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give the Magic Odyssey, 4 stars out of 5. It was a good storyline, and that wrapped some things up, and also I'm glad that they brought Wyynde back and to his normal self, because the guy's been through a lot. And one of the things I appreciated about a couple issues before this was the fact that he was rendered catatonic simply because of the trauma of all this, the accumulated trauma, all the emotional turmoil of all these things that have happened in his life. I mean, his people being wiped out, his newfound wife being mutated into his sort of mer creature, and being essentially mind raped by Garn, and just so when he was rendered catatonic, it was a development that made sense for his character. So it's like, and so so when I saw him initially as this sort of man animal hybrid, courtesy of the mad scientist experiments, I mean, at first I was like, you gotta be kidding, what else is gonna happen to this poor guy? But then, in the last issue, Arion gets his magic back, and he keeps his word that he's going to help Wyynde, and he's able to get Wyynde back to his normal self. And so it's like, good to have you back, man. Glad you're back, pal. It was sad to see, King Datula leave the scene the way he did. I mean, it made sense in context, but at the same time, though, I mean, the subject of suicide, I mean, it's always, a sad thing. And so it wasn't, any less different here. I mean, this is just a fictional story, but, this was an elderly, character, an elderly man, who felt like that, he had failed in his role in life at this point. And so, there's a lot of people, who have been in, I guess, similar shoes in some ways, at least mentally speaking. And so when that happened the way it did in the story, that was actually pretty sad. But wasn't really expecting something like that to happen. But yeah, it was definitely kind of a, sort of a, I guess, a real world tragedy vibe in some ways. But yeah, anyway, though, like I said, a lot happened within these 4 issues. And I guess, the one other thing I could think of that I wish that they had maybe, brushed up on was the fact that, Arion's backstory, his origin story, as it were, when you, take into account, that, first he was, he was killed, then he was brought back to life, but, it was over like, thousands of, or hundreds of years or something like that. It's just, I mean, but at the same time, you know, time worked differently, you know, within, you know, the dark world, I guess. But you know, but it was very confusing in some ways, you know, just when they touched on, you know, the stuff that Arion didn't remember. Like, it was really cool to see, you know, Gerald, and it was cool, you know, being introduced to the character of Guy. But, you know, at the same time, it was like we hadn't really seen the stuff that related to Arion's origin, you know, since like way back in the series. And so, and there was a lot to keep track of, at least in my opinion. And so I feel like in some ways, if they had maybe, you know, provided, you know, a little more context as to, you know, what certain things were within, you know, this dark world, and in relation to Arion's, you know, life within the series, I think things might have been just a little less confusing. I mean, I was able to get the gist of what was going on, but at the same time, I was trying to remember, you know, certain things from way back in the beginning of the series. And so I just wish that they could have, you know, maybe just brushed up on a couple of things here and there, but as far as that stuff goes. But I mean, overall, it was a good storyline, and you know, I'm glad, you know, Arion is a full-powered mage again, and I am definitely curious to see how this series ends, which I'll be reading shortly. But thank you very much for taking the time to check out my review. And if you like what you see here, please you know, hit that like button or subscribe, and if you're not already subscribed. And you know, if you got any feedback, positive, negative, let me know. I'd love to hear, you know, what y'all think of it. So thanks again. Y'all have a good night. Bye.